Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back to episode 15 of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. Today is October 1st, 2018. In this episode, we are taking a break from Roshar, but we will be back. And this week, we are visiting another world in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, Threnody. We'll discuss Threnody in a moment, but first, I am Bill, and I am joined, as always, by my ambitious co-hosts, Amy and Jordan. And welcome to our special co-host, Charlie.
Hi!
Now, Charlie, I was actually introduced to Charlie as Chuck. She's a friend of ours from the Science Fiction Fantasy Club, where all three of us met in college. All four of us, I guess, met in college. But some of you may know her better as Charlie N. Holmberg, author of such novels as The Paper Magician, Veins of Gold, Smoke and Summons, and about a bazillion other books. So welcome, Charlie.
Thank you so much for having me.
So for those of you who listen to the podcast recordings or are watching the videos on YouTube, we want to remind you that it is possible for our listeners to join us during the live stream via chat as we record each episode live at www.twitch.tv/innkeeperstable. We record our episodes every other Monday night starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. So please join us, take an active part in the conversation. So should we just jump right into the big exciting news of what we're doing this week, or should we talk to Charlie first?
I mean, we should at least talk to Charlie first. I think she's earned it.
Yes, I mean she's a nice person, I guess, but
Okay.
So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Now, one of the reasons, of course, we invited you is because you're a friend and a fan of the podcast. A friend of the podcast. I can't say for certain that you're a fan of the podcast.
Bill, don't backtrack now. She's already given.
Am I supposed to make a beeping sound when I back up like that?
You've already forced the endorsement. It's now awkward for her. Don't back up.
Indeed. And then of course you are an author yourself. But one thing that makes it particularly relevant to our podcast is you are a protege of Brandon Sanderson himself, are you not?
Yes, he is my author daddy.
He's your author daddy. So tell us a little bit about that. What do I mean when I say that?
So Brandon Sanderson, every winter semester at Brigham Young University, will teach their English 318R class, which is creative writing. And it's pretty much, I think, exclusively spec fiction at this point. But I was able to enroll in his class in my last semester at BYU, my senior year, and then I audited it the next year, which means I just showed up and I didn't actually pay for it because that's just how it works. And so, but that first year, I was able to be one of the initial 15 in the class. And so he actually workshopped with me in my writing group, I think twice during the semester.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was really great. And yeah, it was the best writing class that I took at BYU by far. Like, he is just so smart, and you can see his classes now online on YouTube and, see how it all goes. But it was a really good experience for me.
So what sorts of stuff did you talk? Did you talk specifically about the writing craft, or was it about the writing business, or
both?
Yeah?
And that's one of the great things about it, is that Brandon talks about the business, right? And he has experience with the business. And so, I mean, everything was great. He would always take questions from the class. Sometimes he would just start a class saying, "What do you want to learn about today?" We would say, and he would just go off on it like he's the genius of the world. Whereas if I ever teach a class like that, I just study my notes for hours before. But yeah, it was great. So I learned about taxes from him and how royalties work, and how to write a query letter, and all the business side of everything. And so yeah, it was a really good experience. I recommend it.
Awesome. So you took it twice, though. I mean, well, once was an audit, but So what's the difference? Like, is it just the workshop was the main difference, or is it?
Yeah, so when you are officially enrolled in the class, you're one of the students, which I think was eventually moved up to 25. But when I went, there were only actually 15 actual students in the class. And those 15 got to actually workshop with Brandon and actually got their stuff graded. Whereas the auditors, they got to go attend lecture and they got to form a writing group from the people in the class, but they didn't actually get to work with Brandon personally.
So how big is the class? Is it like an auditorium class, or is it
they recently switched it. I heard that they finally, because he was like a fire code violation because so many people would come and like cram into the rooms and he wouldn't make them leave. And so they did, I think a year or two ago, they finally gave him like an assembly room. And so you can just show up. But then there's like the few people who actually get to workshop with Brandon.
So the actual class size didn't grow.
Now it's probably like
the population, but the population size of the room grew.
Yeah. So like when I went, it was probably like 30 people in that room. And like some people like sitting at his feet, being like, "Feed me knowledge."
Learning at the feet of the master.
Yes.
So while you took the class, was there any one lesson that you picked up that you feel helped the most, or?
Oh, God. I mean, I took notes on every lesson that he said. The two that first come to mind, the first one would definitely be the business stuff, and like how to approach agents at conferences. I mean, I didn't go to my first writing convention until my senior year. And I didn't send my first query letter until Brandon's class because he required it as part of our final. And so it got me over that wall that might have taken me longer to do otherwise. That's my space heater. Don't worry about that. So that was definitely super helpful. And then just his magic systems were really great. And I actually, because I teach a class now on magic systems, and I spend the first half of it quoting Brandon Sanderson.
Is that at BYU or?
No, I do it at conferences and conventions.
Oh, very cool. That's really cool. I didn't even know that. So, well, because you've got some really interesting magic systems in your work.
Yes, I owe that to Brandon.
Let's talk a little bit about the stuff that you've done. So what is sort of the most exciting thing that you're working on right now, or what, like, in your world, what would listeners be most excited to hear about?
Probably they'd be most excited to know that my debut trilogy has been optioned by the Walt Disney Company and is in development for a movie.
Oh, that little mom and pop studio.
Yeah, I heard that place was started in like a garage or a barn or something. So.
Yeah, they're okay.
Of course, that was a few decades ago. They may have grown a little bit past that at this point. So is that's the Paper Magician?
Yes,
trilogy,
the Paper Magician original trilogy. Yes.
Okay.
So
how many? Exciting. And that's grown beyond the trilogy, right? How many are there now?
There are 4 books now. There's the trilogy, and then there is a standalone novel it's a companion novel to it. And so that one came out this year, and it's called The Plastic Magician.
Very cool.
Thanks.
That's really exciting. Like,
thank you.
Just, yeah. Sorry, I'm.
Okay, I'll just dance.
It beats the stuffing out of anything we do.
Honestly, we make a podcast, so.
I make costumes.
I like your podcast, and I'm sure your costumes are great, but I haven't seen them yet.
I write board game reviews.
You would get along really well with my brother-in-law.
Really?
Yeah, I was reading up about that, and I was like, oh my gosh, him and Matt would be best friends.
Awesome. So when did you first start writing?
I first started writing when I was 13 years old because here's my nerd-tastic thing. That's when I was introduced to anime.
Nice.
And I watched this show with my sister called The Vision of Escaflowne. That's the English title.
Oh, please tell me it was fanfic.
I did write a lot of fan fiction, yes. But I loved that show so much, and I wanted to create something like that. And so I tried to like draw, and I'm not an artist. And so I started writing, and I wasn't a writer either, but I didn't know that. And so I just kept going and eventually got decently good at it. But the whole reason was because of The Vision of Escaflowne.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
The first thing I wrote, or one of the first things that I remember starting was And our old roommate Brett will appreciate this. It was actually well, I didn't realize that it was a fanfic at the time. I was trying to create a plot for a new Mega Man game,
Mhm.
but it was a fanfic. So
I
and
have
I have-
actually. I can show this off to Brandon someday. Except I will never tell anybody what my screen name is. But on fanfiction.net, I have a 500,000 word fan fiction that is totally a Mary Sue. It's 96 chapters long.
that is awesome. So for those fanfic writers of you out there who have people telling you you're not a real writer, look, it can lead to beyond just writing fanfic online.
Well, they say your first million words are garbage, right?
Mhm.
What better way to get them out than in fan fiction?
Then you
Who
don't
was
have
it?
to spend any money on it.
I think it was David Eddings. I was reading somebody asked him about, what advice would you give to a new writer? And he said, you need to sit down and write, 1,000 pages of the best, most, just put everything into it, the best, clearest, most wonderful writing you've ever done. And the person who was interviewing was like, yeah, he says, and then burn it. And it's just like, it was just sort of the harsh, killing your darlings
Oh yeah.
lesson. It's like that's just the way to do it. You just put everything into it and then let it go and destroy it so that there's no trace of it ever again, so that you learn, okay, I can
do better than that.
well, not just I can do better, but I can write something and I don't have to hold tight to everything that I've ever written. And so
Yeah, I've written way too many fan fictions. I've done like Pirates of the Caribbean and several different animes, and yeah, I think I did like a trilogy with somebody else pretty silly that was Pirates. Yeah, it was yeah, it's fun stuff.
oh, cool. Okay, so one other thing is when I first approached you about coming on the show, I basically gave you, the option to choose any piece by Brandon that you wanted. Is there a reason you chose this one?
I chose this one because it's the one I most recently read.
Okay.
And I also, like I said earlier, I am obsessed with the title of this book. I just love telling people the title of this book. And it's different than what he usually writes.
Oh, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a horror, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what did my husband call it? Like a fantastical horror western or something like that.
It reminds me of like I took American Lit because I got my degree in English, and it reminds me kind of the young Goodman Brown and the old puritanical morality stories, or at least the setting reminds me of that. The story itself
has that
is
name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's just sorry, I am stammering like crazy, and I know that our audio listeners are excited to hear what bizarre sounds are coming out of my mouth. But essentially, yeah, it's a story of sort of a Puritan culture, and we felt it was kind of appropriate for us to start with because today's the 1st of October, so it's Halloween season.
My kids keep asking me, like, you didn't do my costume yet. I'm like, it's October 1st. I've got time. You need to back off.
Oh boy.
Children are known for their patience.
Oh yeah, so much.
That's what I hear. So, all right. Well, should we dive into the giveaway?
Yes.
Ooh.
So, for our listeners who've been paying attention, we have a book to give away. This is a copy of Arcanum Unbounded. This is my copy of Arcanum Unbounded that I bought when it first came out. Because when I went to FanX, I did not think ahead and pre-purchase a book for Brandon to sign. So I took my own copy, but he has signed this. It is right there. It is addressed to a listener of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, which is one of you. So we have had people entering for the past several weeks now, and we've gathered a list of entries, and Charlie is going to be our drawer, our
Picker?
picker outer. There's a word for it. I know. Clearly, I got my degree in English because I'm a wordsmith tonight.
I'm glad you went for that because I was going to grab that low hanging
I'm
fruit.
the
if you
girl in
didn't.
the sparkly dress who's spitting the bingo thing. I'm gonna pull one out.
The Vanna White. Yeah,
Vanna
that's
White is
it.
letters. That's right.
All right. So what we've done is we have randomized the list of entries and numbered them from 1 to 32. And Chuck is going to pick a random number using a random number generator. And then I will look up that number on the list and we will know who our winner is. So
right.
whenever you're ready.
Ready? The winner is Lucky 13.
Number 13, who is from Instagram user Meryl_1991. So we will be reaching out to you and getting your mailing address, and we will send you this book as well as one of our Cosmere Studies patches to give to the friend that you tagged in your entry. So congratulations to Meryl1991.
Yay!
Woo!
And speaking of giveaways, we actually just crossed the first goal on Patreon, where we will be having a giveaway every month now, which basically means every other episode since we put out our episodes every 2 weeks. So we will start, we'll announce the next one for that next week. So, and we wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for our patrons. So thank you very much for that and for our wonderful listeners.
Yeah, it's definitely been awesome. We just hit it literally today.
Yeah, we just a few hours ago, so we're excited about that.
Congrats.
Now, as a reminder, so let's go ahead and dive into our discussion on Shadows for Silence. As a reminder to those of you who may just be tuning in to the podcast, we are currently devoting about an episode or two, or four when we're talking about the Roshar books, to discussing each book's storyline, as well as discussing briefly how it fits into the general Cosmere. Once we've made our way through everything, we'll start devoting episodes to some of the different concepts that span the various series and discuss what we're calling aluminum foil hat theories, both our own and those that have been submitted by our listeners. So if you've got an idea about the Cosmere that you'd like us to talk about during the show, be sure to email it to us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com. So for the past 2 months, we have been talking about the Stormlight Archive and all the things that are happening on Roshar, and it is finally time to step away. We love Roshar, but it is nice to have a little bit of a break. Because we're gonna be diving back in deep again in a little while. But this week we are finally taking a break and focusing on a much shorter work, Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell. So let's talk a little bit first about the origin of this book. This book was actually, or not this book, this short story was actually the result of George R.R. Martin leaning over to Brandon during a signing, and he asked him, "Oh, hey, cool." But I love the story because he leaned over and he said, "Hey, you do short fiction?" Of course, he's asking Brandon Sanderson this question, and Brandon's response is, "I do long short fiction."
Sounds about right, yeah.
And so he asked him to write for a piece for a collection called Dangerous Women.
Mm-hmm.
And Brandon's initial worry was that basically all of these stories are going to be either about femme fatales or what he described as men with breasts.
Yes.
And so I love that he decided to make the protagonist of this one a middle-aged mother.
Because that's not usually who you get.
Yeah, I loved it.
Stories.
Well, and honestly, when you look at her, she's terrifying.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Like she's got the whole mama bear syndrome, because suddenly her family's in danger and she's just like, "No, I will break you. Bring it on. Game over. You will not win this fight."
Yeah.
She was ready to break him before her family was in immediate danger.
Uh-huh.
And then it just ups the drama and the stress level as the story goes.
Yep. So, and he decides to name her, of all things, Silence.
Might have been hopeful. How the baby stopped screaming. If I name you Silence, will you be quiet?
And she says, "No, I will not be." Well, except
She's not very talkative though.
She's a
She's not
very
very
quiet and
Yeah.
very quiet and unassuming woman, but my gosh, she turns it into a completely different.
Oh yeah.
She,
It was interesting in the first scene. It starts out with a guy talking Dagon, and he's trying to get himself more free alcohol, and he talks about her, and he's like, "Oh man, she's a harsh woman. I wouldn't be able to marry her. She doesn't feel affection or anything like that." And then it goes to her, and she's freaked out because she's realized that there's dangerous people out in her
right.
area. So it's just kind of interesting that she's able to keep that totally stern face and hide her emotions that well.
And it's not just dangerous people, though. It's dangerous to Sabruki in particular.
Yeah, her adopted daughter.
Yeah. So,
well, they're dangerous to everybody in general. Just they're not nice people.
Yeah. So
it's a good summary. Yes, they aren't.
I'm gonna have to mute for a second because my blood sugar is running low and fun times. So maybe if you want to take over for a bit.
All right. So anyway, the other notes here say that apparently Brandon was doing some genealogy, some family history stuff, and he found that there was somebody in his genealogical line that her name was Silence, and so that's where he got the name, and it's a pretty interesting name. And it was, speaking of the collection, actually, I bought it and I got it for Christmas. I requested it because I found out Brandon was going to be, and I was like, oh, I have to get a Brandon book. Yeah, I have to buy them all. And so I really liked his story, and I liked a few more, but in general, I didn't like a lot of the stories because they did kind of lean more to femme fatales and like women who have some serious mental issues and whatever else, that I didn't enjoy the collection as much as I'd hoped for how many pages it is, because it's like almost 800 pages long, and I only liked like 5 or 6 stories out of it. So
yeah, I'm particularly glad that Chuck, that you joined us for this episode, because that way Amy isn't outnumbered in the one that's about women. Because we'll just have 2 guys talking about women. That works really well. So.
Yeah, I've kind of joked a few times that I'm like, I feel like the diversity hire sometimes, because it's like, well, there's 2 single guys, and then here's me who's a mom. It's like
2 moms. Oh. Yeah, we're the dangerous women now. Yeah. I can start singing Ariana Grande if you want. Make me feel like a dangerous woman. That came out after the anthology, by the way.
So clearly inspired.
Yes.
Obviously. So the other thing was, apparently supposedly there's Hoyt is in the story, but I didn't spot him at all.
Okay, so Brandon has said Hoyt is not in this story.
Oh, he said he's not.
Yeah, Brandon has said Hoyt is not in this story, but Peter Alstrom, who is Brandon's assistant and who is basically the one who goes through and says, okay, Brandon, this is like, he keeps track of everything. He's almost the database, the one that Brandon goes to and says, does this work? But he has said, like, there was a post on a forum several years ago, and Peter's response was, Brandon has said that Hoyt's not in it, but I read it again this week and I'm not convinced.
Does Brandon have a reason to fib about that?
Yes.
I don't know that.
Because Brandon's a dirty liar at all times.
Brandon doesn't typically fib about things like that, but he has admitted that he forgets. So
he has lots.
I read so many books, I forget where these characters are.
Exactly. To be fair, when you're writing a series that spans millennia and you're writing all these different stories, it is easy to start getting things mixed up. But
yeah, if Hoyt was in there, my first guess he would be Dagon, and because Dagon just seems to like know things.
Except that Dagon also, like, you actually look inside Dagon's head a bit, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in the first and the last scene is Dagon.
Yeah, I don't know. He seems slightly Hoytish to me.
Yeah, he feels a little bit, but he doesn't seem to know quite enough for it to be Hoyt.
Yeah, that or Dob. That would be my other guess.
Now that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I love the statement.
I'm not a fool, but or something like that.
I'm an idiot, but I'm not a fool.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
right. He's like,
that
no,
was
I
interesting.
totally know who you are.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I don't know who it would be.
And he's also said if Hoyt does make an appearance, it's even briefer than his cameo in Alloy of Law, which was like
Which
blink and
is-
you'll miss it, nothing. So
Yeah.
Maybe he was one of the shades.
the other thing is,
Boy,
maybe
that's a
the
story if that's true.
The other thing is there's more than one world hopper at this point. So, and we know that Naj is from Threnody. Do y'all remember Naj?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
And so
From
he's
Secret
from
Place.
Threnody. So maybe he's, checking it or something. I don't know. And so,
Yeah.
okay, so let's talk a bit about some of the characters who have a major point. The interesting thing is this is one of the shortest works that Brandon's done, particularly in the Cosmere, if not the shortest one. I'm not sure if this is shorter than Sixth of the Dusk. Sixth is a hard word.
It
And
is-
so-
It is. That was a hard one to say.
It was a mean prank for
Six.
Brandon to put Sixth of the Dusk. So, but anyway, but this is one of the shortest ones. So I think one of the best things that we can do is we can just talk about some of the characters who are major players, and then as we do that, we'll touch on different points. Plot points and things, or if there's just something that comes up. I don't feel like we need to be quite as organized about this one just because there is less to cover. So I feel like if we're more free flowing,
Fluid.
we'll still end
Then
up
we'll
covering
discuss.
just about everything anyway.
Yeah.
So but let's talk about Silence because she is the dangerous woman in question.
She's a bounty hunter.
She is a
but no
bounty
one
hunter.
knows it.
She is incredibly competent.
Oh my goodness. And she's very much just get it done. Like how
Mhm.
she takes out the they're not bandits. What are they? The
Yeah.
Or
They're
they guess they're
bandits.
bandits. Anyway, how she takes them out is brutal. I think was it you, Chuck,
Oh my
that made the
gosh.
comment that you were like, he just did what?
The first time I read that, I was mortified. I was like, Brandon! I was like,
Oh,
what am I reading?
Gruesome compared to a lot of his other stuff.
Brutal.
That's
Oh,
a
the second
horrible
time
way
was
to
really
go.
fun.
I remember people who were bothered by the scene in the second Mistborn book where they bisect Strathventure and the horse.
I don't understand
Oh, yeah.
why that was one of the most glorious kills to ever occur.
But the thing
Totally
is,
deserved.
these kills are so much more grisly.
So the thing
And
that's
you're like right there,
Oh,
feeling
man.
it. Oh.
And like a hammer or whatever it is that she uses on him. Just
So yeah, I find it interesting because the rules he comes up with for the shades, he said were inspired by the Jewish rules of following the Sabbath. Just because there's these rules that you just have to keep, and so he followed that. But the way she actually goes about killing people is because clearly the rules are sort of weighed in favor of maybe not killing people. That seems to be a poor idea in most situations. It reminds me very much of like a rules lawyery D&D player being like, well, I may have no hands, but technically I'm trained in unarmed combat, so
It's very pharisaical.
it's allowed.
so I use my teeth to hold the sword, and I'm good. I'm unarmed.
Unarmed wow.
Oh,
That'd be
God.
horrible.
For the record, if those who know him, Shiosk is the inventor of that.
Of course he is. Shiask is another friend from Quark, so. But yeah, well, it's a very pharisaical. He says they're the rules of the Jewish Sabbath, but it's a very pharisaical interpretation of them. Very much letter of the law, not spirit of the law.
Is there one about shedding blood in the Pharisee?
Again, he said that it's
they're-
loosely.
And loosely, okay, because I was like, I don't know if they mentioned that one.
But yeah, kindling a flame.
Yeah,
it's
because
not-
you're supposed to
you
just
can't
leave
have fire,
overnight.
but
You
you
just
can't-
keep it overnight. Yeah, you can't do the work to start a new fire,
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't leave eggs too close to the fire. That's one that I always remember. Is that
And then I think there's
you
a
can't
certain
cook an
number
egg
of-
by having it too close to the fire.
You can't accidentally cook an egg. That is shameful.
I'm just like, really? Okay.
But yeah, so the three rules, and they're referred to as the simple rules, which is a very interesting terminology. I feel because it's just like these are the three rules that you need to follow to be safe.
Mhm.
Well, they
And
are
if you
fairly
don't-
simple.
And they keep everybody else safe. It's not just your safety; it's everybody's safety.
I thought that the blood one was really interesting because one of them is like don't shed blood, but if you're like menstruating or something, then you're fine.
He did. Yeah, he mentioned that it's like that or like a bloody nose. He's like, they don't
They
cause
just
problems.
know.
Well, it's not just don't
They
shed
know the
blood,
difference.
don't shed the blood of another.
So don't
So-
That's
menstruate
probably
someone
how
else.
it's excluded then. Yeah.
Exactly.
Did you just say don't menstruate for someone else?
I missed that.
I don't even want to get into how that doesn't make sense in any way.
Oh man, how would that work?
I don't want to
Anyway,
know.
I'm not going to think about that right now. I don't want to think about that. Okay.
But yeah, the fact that shedding blood, and it's not, the blood isn't what enrages them. It's the shedding of the blood that enrages the shades. And they will immediately go after the person who did it.
Yeah. But they'll go after the person who had their blood shed too because they're already ramped up.
Yeah, they
Right,
have like
but
a slight
first-
pattern for it.
Yeah, that's the thing is first they're going to go after, and then after that, anybody around is fair game, and it's just like, you don't want to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't run because that's rule number 3 is you can't run away.
Yeah.
That'll attract them.
Well,
Power
she
walk,
says
power
like,
walk.
what's it? When they're green eyes, you hold still. When they're red eyes, you run.
You're just like, okay,
Oh,
holding still ain't going to help you no more.
I just like that that's the opposite of a traffic light.
It's true.
Also, it's interesting. So when I first read this story, I'm going to admit, I missed the line where he talked about how they're humanoid in shape. Because for some reason I imagined, and as I have thought back, I realized this is basically something from or not from World of Warcraft. There are these dark shades that kind of have these spiky shoulders that I'm imagining. And as I've read it this time, I was like, oh, I imagined those wrong. I was influenced by something completely different.
Oh, me too, though. I didn't imagine the human at all. I imagined him kind of shaped like, what's his name? The bad guy with all the gold on Spirited Away.
No face.
Yeah, no face, but without the
Okay.
mask. But it's just with eyes. It's like this black
Like
thing
shape.
with eyes. That's how
Yeah.
I picture them, even though that's not right.
See, and I imagine it more as what is it, the villain from in Fantasia during the Hall of the Mountain King, I think it is, if I'm remembering right. It's just or in The Emperor's New Groove, when you see when Yzma turns into the cat, and you first think she's turned into this demonic thing.
The shadow.
That's how I picture them.
That's funny.
It's
I
the
thought-
shadow of an evil kitten, apparently. So,
I guess this is backtracking to the blood thing too. I thought it was just like a really interesting piece of world building that there's no predators in the forest.
yes,
I thought
Yeah.
that was so cool.
it's such an
Well, I
interesting
mean, it makes
concept.
sense why they wouldn't have existed any longer because if there were any, they would have been wiped out.
Well, and that's the thing is that the shades aren't exclusive to humans. Because
Oh.
when
makes
she triggers when she sets up the explosion, I believe it's actually a horse that triggers the explosion, and the horses are just are destroyed as well, or sucked dry
it
by the
attacks
shades as well.
But do they turn into shades?
I think they do.
And that's another question is, do you become a shade by being killed by a shade, or are there other ways? Because they have that part where Silence is trying to help William Ann, and she says, if she dies this way, she'll become a shade. And so I'm like, so is that what you have to do to become a shade, or is it like dying in anger, or like what's the trigger there?
I don't know. I don't remember seeing anything specific, just that one line.
Yeah.
No.
And I mean, you don't know how the grandmother dies either, except that she dies close to home. But I assume she was also killed by shades.
Well, she was defending. She
Yes.
sent Silence
Was she
on.
defending?
So you know that there were, she told her to get out of there. I think is what it was.
Didn't she push her into the closet?
Oh.
No, that
Well, the other way around.
Well, originally though, I think didn't she hide Silence in the closet, or am I remembering?
I
that
don't.
wrong?
I don't
think you're
remember.
remembering something else. I know it's when Silence was pushed into a circle with one to learn how to fight one.
Oh yeah.
Right. Which let's talk about
horrifying.
Silence's grandmother, because
Oh my
she
goodness.
seems, speaking of dangerous women, she seems scary as
Oh my goodness.
words that I don't say.
Yeah.
My gosh, that is a terrifying woman, but she's also pretty dang hardcore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But who was it? So, because so when she put Silence in that circle to make her fight a shade, so she's learning how to do it. Silence is 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I think was it Jordan who brought it up? Who said the question of ethics is it ethical for you to force somebody to be hard when they have to live in a hard world? Because Silence hates her, but she's grateful for it, and yet she will not do the same for William Ann, even though she's grateful that she was taught that way.
She did teach her some survival things, but it's not the same to be taught it and to be shoved into a circle and do or die.
Yeah.
The thing is,
it very much reminds me of Reen and Vin's relationship, where Reen is trying to teach her some very hard lessons, probably lessons that he learned himself. In a very similar way, because that tends to be a cycle, and their world was the definition of a crap sack world if you were Ska. And he taught them that lesson, or taught Vin the lesson that you can't trust anyone, but at the same time, we know in the end he didn't fully believe it. Very similar in my mind to sort of Silence. She believes these lessons were good for her, but she also doesn't quite believe that she should teach that to her daughter,
which is why she has such a complicated relationship even after her grandmother's dead. She has such a complicated relationship with her because she thanks her for teaching her these lessons, but she also hates her for the way she taught her these lessons.
Yeah, and there's that line in the book too where Silence realizes that sometimes she gets God and her grandmother confused. That sometimes when she thinks of God, she's thinking of her grandmother.
Yeah, if it's with that kind of a woman, though, that would kind of be the all-powerful being.
The almighty in your life.
The almighty, that is the source of everything right there.
That's another interesting thing is, what does she refer to her to the deity as? The forgotten god? Or the unnamed or unknown?
Let's look.
The god beyond?
The god beyond sounds like it.
Well, because that's the thing is,
God, but I don't know.
There's been a term used on a different shard world where they've referred to the god beyond, I think. And apparently this is not, Brandon has said, I believe, this is not a shard.
Because isn't the shard here shattered or something?
I was still picturing Sazed every time they talked about God.
Well, that's a different world, though.
It doesn't matter. I had a hot crush on Sazed, so I picked her.
Really?
I can. Oh, yeah.
Let's take a deviation. Let's talk about the now.
No, it's funny. Actually, I was half contemplating trying to make a keeper outfit to try and do a picture for Instagram, and then I looked at actual drawings of it, and I was like, no, never mind. That's too much work, and I can't make my ears loop down this far. It's just not happening. I'm not doing that to my ears.
We can Photoshop it.
It just looked. I was like, that just looks painful, and.
Well, in the words of Tenacious D, you're not hardcore unless you live hardcore. So.
Oh my gosh.
It is the God beyond.
In the words of Tenacious D, also, nay, we are but men. Rock.
You agreed to come on to this podcast. It's too late to have regrets now.
Oh man, no, you guys are good. Yeah, but and I mentioned earlier, not in this podcast, but that because rereading it, there's that you see one solid flashback of the grandmother, right? So it's not just her remembering, it's you see it. And the grandmother's like, oh, it's all part of the plan. It's all part of the plan. It's what's the plan, Sanderson? He's just fish hooking us again. But that's what made it feel Cosmere to me, you know. It's just oh, what is the whole thing? He's gonna die before it happens, then I'm gonna have to finish it for him.
That's the thing is, Brandon has said, before he was asked to write this story, he actually had Threnody created.
Yeah.
And he knew that it was important to the Cosmere, he said. And it's just
that makes
we've just got a short story. Why is this important to the Cosmere, Brandon? Stop giving us tidbits, tell us the story.
Oh no.
Because I did mention, I remember in Secret History there was some when do we care about, I guess I shouldn't say who the main character in that book is, but when the main character, the protagonist in that one is wandering around, he overhears people saying, oh, is it just some shades that escaped from Threnody? And I think that was, so makes me wonder, well, what else can wander out and around if the shades can, and what exactly are they composed of, other than just, are they somebody's investiture that's left over, or...
It does seem to be something. It seems to be some sort of cognitive shadow.
And, cognitive shadows, we know, Spren are also cognitive shadows. And there are other things, such as in Mistborn Secret History, which we will not discuss right now, but that is also referred to as a cognitive shadow. So
interesting.
But
it's interesting.
These ones seem to do more than others are capable of, which makes you wonder why exactly they can.
Well, if you read the prologue, not the prologue, but what is it? Basically the mini essay before this in Arcanum Unbounded, where Chris is discussing the Threnodite system, one thing that they're talking about is that there was a shard that was killed here. There was a battle between two shards, which basically that destruction rocked the world and messed up both the planet and the people.
Oh, that's probably where the homeland was, because they talk about how the Four Scouts came from the homeland, and it was taken over by an unknown evil, which
by the evil,
shard shattering would kind of fit that.
Well, because we've seen the effects of shard shattering on Cell, and we know that messed up the magic of that world pretty nice and good.
Oh yeah. It created a whole new set of different...
and the thing that's interesting is the shard that was broken was ambition. Which we don't know much about ambition as far as ambition's goal, but just judging by the name, if you consider what are pioneers, which that's what the Four Scouts basically are. They're pioneers.
That's a good point.
They're ambitious. They move out. They go and explore. And it's clearly part of their society. So you wonder what that line is all the way back to back when there was a shard there, and maybe there were people there, and what's the effect, and we don't know, because we're never going to find out at the rate Brandon writes good books.
Brandon, you brilliant bastard.
I read your books.
Here's what it says in the essay. It says, the direct clash between two shards of Adonalsium had a profound effect on the planets of this system. The actual battle took place in the vast space between planets, and though the true contest happened mostly in other realms, the ripples of destruction and change washed through the system. Investigations into how this changed the other planets of the system have been fruitless, as none of them have perpendicularities to allow physical visitation, which means that Threnody does have a perpendicularity.
How do you think this big? How did one person think this big?
Well, and that's why the wiki exists. The wiki that I want to get my hands on someday. I'm just like, I want to dive in.
Oh, man.
Brandon's got his own wiki file with all of this cross-reference data.
You have to. He'd have to.
There's just too much otherwise.
I can barely keep one book straight.
It started out, as he said, this enormous binder that he kept notes in when he was working at the hotel. And I'm just like, I want the wiki. I want to dive in. I want to sink my teeth into it and just read for days.
I wonder what poor person had to type all of those up.
I can't remember her name, but he started doing it, and then he passed it on to somebody who is now known as the continuity. Like, she's in charge of continuity for Brandon stuff. So he says, okay, this happens and this happens. She says, no. Those people are over there, and they have to get here. And so she's basically, her job is to go in and fact check Brandon as he's writing and make sure that the things that he's doing, he is allowed to do.
That is a crazy job.
No, that one goes there. That one goes there.
Well played.
I can't jump a continent that fast.
Jordan is angling for title drop. So
I'm just angling for whenever I get to finally take my NyQuil and go to sleep.
Sorry, Jordan.
Poor Jordan.
One thing I think is interesting is that her daughter's name is William Ann.
I love that name.
That was
I
her
think that is
husband's name.
Right, and so, but are y'all familiar with any actual practice where this is a thing, where the daughter is named after, with a very, very traditionally male name?
It just feels very Western, doesn't it, though?
Mm-hmm.
Very frontier, yeah.
So I want to discuss the names, because some of the names I absolutely love, and then they knock me right out of the story. And William Ann is one of them.
Which one?
William Ann is one of them. The other one, there was a guy named Abraham. And so, this is the thing. When you name someone Silence, I can totally dig that. Silence is a concept. It's a thing. It exists in all cultures. Unless there's a culture that just doesn't be quiet, in which case, welcome to the forests of hell or whatever. But the name William Ann implies that there's a name William. It'd be like, to me anyway, it's like as if like you'd be in Mistborn, it's like, ah yes, the crew of Kelsier, Vin, Elend, and Doug. And it just doesn't flow for me. It drives me insane.
I would love for there to be a Doug on Scadrial. I want Doug. Now I want there to be Doug.
There's a Dob.
I have just met you and I love you. Oh gosh.
It kind of is. What's kind of weird is Sabruki. Like that name feels almost Japanese to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds almost Japanese.
Or like Middle Eastern or something, like not what you'd expect in like a Western type setting. And it seems like everybody else is kind of that way. I guess Theopolis isn't really the same, but I could see someone going more Greco-Roman.
Well, Sabruki, I mean, do we know like where her home was, like how far away that was from the forest?
Well, her home was in the forest.
That's right, because Silence went to her, right?
Yeah, she got there after the slaughter happened.
Mm-hmm.
So it was within whatever distance.
Now, one thing though is that I believe, if I'm remembering right, it was mentioned that she had dark skin. So she's a different race than Silence.
Yeah,
they could have been refugees or immigrants or whatever.
Yeah, and I think, and this is like the Star Trek syndrome. I feel like how in Star Trek you go to another planet and everyone's the same, where it's like in a real planet like Earth, there's so many kinds of different people covering this whole face of the planet, right? And so I think
this is the Egypt planet.
Yes, right. And so it's like it's easy to, I mean, imagine Threnody would have a ton of diversity on it, and so it just makes you wonder, where she hails from. I don't remember what the original question was. Oh, that her name sounds so different.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that was interesting about the what was it? They called them the homesteads.
Mm-hmm.
Was that they didn't use silver around the homesteads because it was just so expensive.
Let them go in and out. And that
my understanding was that, so I might have read it wrong, but my understanding was the homesteads were a ways away, not in the forests. And the Forest Scouts are the ones that went into the forests.
I'm pretty sure that
there were homesteads in the forest, but they just didn't put the silver around it. And hers is in Silence's is a way stop. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And so
they mentioned, is it the homestead they mentioned they go around? Sorry,
go
ahead.
Yeah.
So the homesteaders,
she made sure that her place is a safe place, whereas the homesteaders, they let the shades go in and out, and they can't keep them out.
That's right. Now, they talked about that at the beginning.
There's the fort towns that are outside of the forests.
That's what I'm thinking of. Okay.
She considers fort towns the big city yokels.
Mm-hmm. And that's where she has to take her bounties. Mm-hmm. Right.
That's where Theopolis is from.
Well, she gives them to Theopolis, though, I think, because she doesn't go directly.
So who's going to do them now? I wonder, is Dob going to do them? Because she solves the Theopolis problem, but who's going to turn in her bounties?
Right.
I think she mentioned that she's like, we have to find somebody to do that now.
Right.
So that was one future.
Yeah, before the corpse rots.
The interesting thing, though, is that she also pinned the whole White Fox persona on Theopolis.
Which is
that
was genius.
But the thing is, Dagon has already started creating a new persona that she can use, completely just because he likes to talk and have people buy beer for it. And so, okay, so now Jordan, I was talking to you outside, and you seemed interested in the whole concept of silver is the metal that kind of showed up as.
Yeah, so it's interesting for me for two reasons. One, Brandon originally had silver in Mistborn. It was what tin was. Or is. And so
it became 10.
Yeah, and so originally that was silver, but then Brandon, for some reason, I don't exactly know why, abandoned it. Well, now here it's showing up, and silver's kind of important. It's doing a thing.
Doing lots of things.
Yeah, and it's doing something, well, yeah, a lot. it heals if you've been touched by the shades. It prevents the shades. It's a force field.
It's anti-evil.
Yeah. And so it just makes me wonder, what is going on with silver that makes it so important?
It basically purifies investiture-style wounds. It's like it heals poison that's based on investiture, essentially.
There's the English major coming out right there.
What?
Just big words.
Sorry, investiture is the word that Brandon uses for his magic juice. So, is that a better term?
Yeah, there you go.
It's definitely smaller words.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a really good point. It makes me want to go look up some stuff in Mistborn now. But because, like, when I read about the silver, I mean, silver is used so much in just, what's the word I want?
Just regular fantasy, vampires, werewolves.
Yeah, urban fantasy lore is what I'm,
Well, I'm trying to remember the exact details of it, but Brandon has said that, for example, silver could be used to heal somebody who was damaged by, say, Nightblood. Like where he starts sort of sucking the investiture and destroying them that way, and silver can protect from that. There have been, I dove too deep into the 17th Shard forums and stuff like that, and because over there they post different questions that people have asked Brandon in interviews, and somebody was asking him, and he sort of said, "Yeah, it would work in these sorts of situations." So suddenly, oh wow, there's more.
And the thing that's very interesting about that is it implies, because we already knew that Nightblood fed off investiture. Because we've seen it eat breaths, that's investiture. And later on we see it feed on other stuff. So, it implies that the shades are feeding off your investiture. Which, the way you wither when someone sucks up your investiture implies something about how important investiture is to living in the Cosmere.
The other thing is, would shades have the same effect on somebody who's not from Threnody? Because in that essay it says the destruction of the clash between the two shards, that destruction, it affected both the world and the people. So, would somebody not from Threnody, would they turn into a shade if they were attacked by shades?
Or if they were full of stormlight?
Or would it just take your stormlight and then affect you? I don't know.
The other thing that's interesting is he also said that, or she also said that some form of investiture existed on the planet even before the clash of the shards. And so it's just,
what does that mean?
Right. And that's the thing, is he's giving us these tidbits and we're like, we want to talk about this, but this is all we've got. As an aside, Jordan, the reason he abandoned silver is because the reason he put silver in is he thought that pewter was an alloy of silver and something else. And when he realized that it actually isn't, then he had to change it to something else that was part of pewter.
Well, I still find that interesting because silver is such a... So, this is me starting to speak historically. Silver is one of the first metals humanity tends to find because it's big, it's shiny, and it's a very soft metal, so it's easy to smelt and to form into other shapes. And so you would think he would rely upon that in the world, known for metal. But he decided, instead of changing pewter, he changed tin to silver.
Right.
And tin is my understanding, and this is all coming from my memories of playing Civ 4, so, good sourcing. But I'm pretty sure tin is discovered after silver, if my understanding is correct. And so I just find it interesting that he decided to abandon it. But then still use it. So it's important to him to use it. And it's just weird to me that he said, all right, another metal is important that's not on Scadrial. And that's fascinating to me. The other thing that's interesting is how they protected her waypoint is the fact that they're interlocking rings. I thought sort of like the Olympic logo as far as how they overlap. I just thought that was sort of
you
a
have
cool
to dig
way.
down so nobody can just steal it. They're
Yeah.
like chained underneath the earth.
Well, see, the way I imagined it is it was bars that locked together in a ring shape, and then they're concentric.
I picture them like this. Like they just go like that.
I apparently read it too fast when I was reading it because I couldn't remember exactly what they looked like. I just know that the shades would affect them and she'd have to replace them every so often when they've kind of used up.
It's like every like
That's
2
so-
days.
Or some crazy amount.
And then, of course, okay, let's look a little bit at Silence's psyche, because she decided to trap her grandmother's shade in a shrine
And
to
like
the
a
unknown
little
god.
shrine thing.
As
my
you do.
goodness. And it's the part that gets me is it goes back in willingly and like hangs out in
And
there and it's like
And it
how
never
much
attacks
willpower
her.
and it makes you wonder how much willpower they still have, or if her grandmother was just that strong-willed that she kept it.
Yeah, and that she
Her-
still
her
holds
memory.
most of her form. Her human
Right.
Form.
Mhm.
It's just her grandmother as a shade is just such an interesting concept.
And it's
Yeah.
funny
We
because
do
there's
know
there's
that-
all the talking about like the fact that it's her husband that's around somewhere, and it's like, no, actually it's her grandmother that she has trapped.
And also,
You
it's like,
don't realize.
when did she do that? Like, was her grandmother being like eaten alive outside, and she's like, "Well, I'm gonna go line this closet with silver." Like,
Or did her grandmother just, after that happened, she just sort of hung around? Because that's the
Or
other
I
thing.
wonder if
It's,
it's
they say that the grandmother never attacks Silence. No matter, she
mhm.
even when she's attacking, after she attacks others, she stops for Silence, and it's just sort of
well, rumors have to
There's-
start somewhere. So I wonder if that's where the rumor of her husband's shade came from. People saw a shade hanging out around, like, "Oh, it's her husband's." And then Silence is like, "Okay, into the closet."
Back in the closet.
some people have skeletons in the closet. No.
Oh, man.
She's got
Silence
something
goes-
so much scarier.
They're just terrifying, and I love it because that's just how Brandon works. He takes something and he's like, how can I do this differently? How can I do this my way?
Yeah, exactly.
Theopolis was kind of interesting in that he felt very foppish almost, and then you find out that he's actually really a jerk and trying to be. He manipulates her tries to manipulate her quite a bit too.
But that's the
But
thing.
she-
Theopolis is a very dangerous man, and Silence
yeah.
acknowledges that. But in the end, Silence is the scary one.
Oh yeah.
Very much so.
So the
I
thing
mean-
I liked about Theophilus was that I listened to the audiobook version of this, and
I hated the audio version of
so
Theopolis.
I started off hating it. She makes the voice very high, very nasally, and he always says and it always goes up just like that.
He sounds like a Skeksis.
And I didn't like it. And then at the very end, when he starts getting especially smug, she then goes way over the top. And like it just keeps going up. And at this point, it's gone so far that suddenly I've come all the way back around, and I love it, and it's wonderful. And it's exactly what I wanted, and I didn't realize it.
I just completely disagree with you on this one.
I haven't heard it, so I can't judge that.
I just did not like it.
No, just like think about it, coming back around just makes me think of that crossbow bolt. And Brandon has a stupid ability to like everything he puts in the story has a purpose, and yet he can still fool you. Even though you're reading it, you're like, "Oh, this is going to be something," and then he can still get you at the end.
And then
Like,
you forget about it.
Yeah, I had totally like. I was telling you guys during my reread, I'm like, well, I don't really know what the point of Sabruki is. And then I finished the book, I'm like, the freaking crossbow bolt, like, that's freaking genius, Because, like, I was expecting the first time that Sabruki was going to come out, that she was going to wake up from the drought, and she doesn't.
Uh-huh.
But, like, he gives it just enough time that you forget that happened, and then it's just like, it's like that moment where in Oathbringer where he's like, unite them, and I'm like losing my freaking mind.
Surprising but inevitable. Dadgummit, Brandon. I say
so
that a
well
lot.
done.
I say dadgummit, Brandon a lot.
Or like,
Found.
oh yeah, we hear that her husband's shade guards the place. They're like, oh yeah, like that's totally gonna come back in, and then he twists it on you,
Because suddenly you're not thinking about the shade, you're thinking about how the heck is she going to survive when these shades are coming after her. The eyes are red. We know that, like, hands of blue, or 2x2 hands of blue, eyes of red, you're freaking dead.
Yeah.
And it's just, and so you're sitting here thinking, and you're so absorbed in this part of the story that you've forgotten what happened over here. And then suddenly it's back, and you're like, oh, right, that happened.
We're good. Yes.
Yeah. It's so good. Stupid Brandon.
Yep.
Stupid, sexy Brandon.
Just so people know, that was a Simpsons reference. Jordan is not latently attracted to Brandon Sanderson, at least as far
You
as
can't
I
prove
know.
anything, frankly.
No.
And I don't like you prejudging, frankly.
Jordan's like,
Everyone
I
does
said
my
what I
Dungeon
said.
Master says, as far as you know.
I said as far as I know. I couched it. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Threnody, just the background and everything. We're almost done. We haven't really talked much about the plot, except that, well, if you're listening to this, you've probably read it. And if you haven't read it, go read it. It's
Go
short.
read it.
So,
I thought the smartest thing, I know this isn't Threnody, but like the thing that made me the most impressed with Brandon reading this book was that trap. I was like, that is genius. Like, I never would have thought about assembling a trap like that.
oh, where it would trigger and explode.
With the horse? Yeah. I just thought that was clever.
It's like, because she didn't draw the blood.
Even that! They talk about the
didn't
fire
light the
sword at the
flame.
beginning. And then he even sets that up as a thing.
And how she tracks the horses too.
You think
Oh,
that you're
gosh.
doing a good job as an author, and then you read Brandon Sanderson, and you're
me.
like, what is my life?
Yeah, the way she tracks the horses, that was amazing.
Yeah, and was it
Drugs
the
the
alchemist
horses.
tries to guess it, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna do this," and she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do that," and then he leaves, and
Yes,
she's
you
like, "No,
got
I'm gonna,
it.
yeah, I'm actually doing this other way that's smarter."
She makes the horses pee so they don't notice,
And
hey,
it
this is
glowy pee at that.
and
And
it
they step in
glows
each
under a
other's
certain
pee.
light.
Mhm.
It's just brilliant. Because dadgummit Brandon.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, you also have just the very little thing of, oh, hey, she put a door to make a four-way stop so she can let this thing out whenever she needs to.
Mm-hmm.
With her mother. Like, I didn't think about a door being a swinging gate of silver.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to keep a pet ghost. And
As
stick
you
it
do.
on. The other thing that's interesting is with silver, how it gets used up. Because that's not something you really typically see in stuff about silver.
Mhm.
Typically silver it's a ward. It pushes them away. In this, though, there is something inherently in silver. And when it comes in contact with the shade, it crackles and then blackens. And it's like it's been spent.
Mhm.
And so, that's got to affect the economy of this world, because silver is just so valuable, not just because it's shiny and malleable, but because it can keep you alive.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know, it fascinates me.
That is a good point.
So, any other insights before we move on? Because
No.
we might want to go ahead and start wrapping things up if we don't have.
The only other thing that I can think of is how dark the bad guys are in finding out about Sabruki's past. Like,
Oh, yeah.
he's had dark, scary things happen, but this definitely feels a lot.
Yeah, this is
more
one of the
cringy.
darkest things that he's written. Partly because the scary stuff is mundane, which means
Yeah,
it's
it's
stuff
the
that can
stuff that
happen
it
and
that
does
it
happen
could
in our
happen.
world.
That makes it that much more scary.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about speculative fiction is the mundane stuff is the more, even though you have all this magic and wonder and amazing stuff that can never happen here, it's the mundane stuff that still strikes home.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that can happen in our world, the stuff that we can relate to, because this is life.
Is this real life?
Yeah.
Just fantasy.
All right, well let's start moving forward. So as always, of course, we want to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to keep creating new episodes of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. The show will continue to be free for everybody, but if you do want to support us, even with just $1 or $2 each episode, you can go to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. When you become a patron, you get immediate access to our Discord channel, which has been growing and becoming more active lately. That's a lot of fun. And we've got a budding community there on Discord. You can continue the discussion about the Cosmere or about the show itself or about any other thing just with a bunch of other people who enjoy Brandon Sanderson's work. You also get bonus content like the 6-7, which is a collection of 7 pieces of content that the 3 of us find for each episode and we want to share with our listeners. You also get early access to bonus shows that we produce, automatic entry into our giveaways, and more. Now, just to clarify, those giveaways aren't exclusive to patrons and they're free to enter. Our patrons will just be given an automatic entry to each of those. And of course, you also help us to make the show and improve the quality of our episodes. As we get more patrons, we're hopefully going to be able to record our episodes more frequently and invest in better equipment, which will make the audio quality better and clearer. Now, this week we have some new patrons we want to thank. We want to thank Eric S., John W., and this last one, I'm pretty sure it's not your real name. It is You Do Good Things. So thank you for your generosity. It's because of your donations that we're able to keep putting out new episodes of the show. So thank you all very much. We really appreciate that. Now, of course, outside of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, we have our own personal projects that we're working on. Charlie, where are the best places that we can find, that our listeners can find you online? And are there any recent or upcoming books that you want to call attention to right now?
Online, my website is charlieandholmberg.com, and I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all under the name CN Holmberg. And my next book, oh, look. It's right here. Look at that.
Imagine that.
Isn't it beautiful? So this is the best book I have ever written.
Wow.
And it's called Smoke and Summons, and it's the first book of a new trilogy of mine, and it comes out February 1st, but I'm really excited for that. So you guys should read it. It's basically like Psycho Pokemon meets magical fidget spinners.
What?
I think we have a title.
That's a long title.
And our titles are already going to be long because we typically put in the name of the book, which is
like
That's a long one.
a long
I had to type up that hashtag, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it just keeps going.
Like, I'm almost tempted to just say hashtag Shadows for Silence.
Yeah.
Or hashtag Silence Montaigne. Yeah. Now, the funny thing is, my introduction to Charlie's writing was actually at a Quark Halloween social. And I remember there was a piece that she'd written, and it was about a werewolf, I think.
I'm so surprised that you remember that.
I don't remember the details of it, but I remember reading it and thinking, holy crap, she's good, and she's going somewhere. So I'm really glad to see that you actually have gone somewhere and continue to write and put stuff out, because I remember being really impressed at first. So I love that
Thank you.
you're doing more. All right, Jordan, where can we find you outside of the podcast?
Well, we can always find me on twitch.tv/splicestream. I'll be continuing Amiibo fighting. We're going to be starting a new tournament here, the Amiibo League, where the rules are set up to try and follow Smash Ultimate, because that game's coming out and I desperately need everything that game can give me.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. And Amy, how about you?
So I am on most of the social media sites. I'm on Instagram as coincidence_cosplay. And I'm on Twitter as Coincidence Cosp because the name is too long. And on Facebook as Coincidence Cosplay and Props. And I'm doing lots of random things. And I'm going to start selling pillow dice. This is a D20.
I want that.
So
I
need to iron out a few last details. But yeah, it's embroidered because I have a fancy machine that does that.
For our audio listeners, she just held up a pillow that is a D20, and that is amazing.
It's great. And I'm going to try and figure out how to make like a 4-sided as well, and like an 8 and a 10 and all that stuff.
Nice.
But so I figure that's something that I can make money off of to fund my costumes.
Awesome.
Expensive. So yes.
Very cool. And when I'm not here, I'm writing board game reviews over at the Innkeeper's Table at www.innkeeperstable.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Innkeeper's Table. If you've enjoyed the show, please head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. We would love to get your feedback, and it really, really makes a big difference in bringing in new listeners to the show. Next to becoming a patron, it's actually the best way that you can support us. And of course, be sure to share the show with other Brandon Sanderson fans that are in your life. Before we close the episode, Charlie, Amy, Jordan, do you have any final thoughts about anything we've talked about tonight?
Silence is hardcore.
It's always the quiet ones.
William Ann is a good name.
Hey, I like the name William. I mean, it's done me well. So, and I was named after my grandmother. Thank you very much. She went by Billy. So,
Did not know this. You think you know
didn't.
a guy?
I haven't been really closed-mouthed about that. Interesting. Well, Charlie, thanks for joining us tonight. We've really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for having me. It's fun.
It's been great. It's been great having you.
It was nice being not the only girl.
You're welcome for the escort.
And you're welcome to show up on any episode you want.
Absolutely. Anytime you want.
We have witnesses.
If you're just like, hey, I want to be on a podcast again, you know people, and you're welcome anytime. Seriously.
Thank you.
Plus, it helps us out, and I figure after helping you move a piano several years ago, I figure you owe it. So. No, but we really did enjoy having you. It's been great.
Thank you.
Now, for our listeners, if you have questions or feedback, we would love to hear it. Let us know what you think of the show, what your favorite moments from the Cosmere have been, what topics you've been dying to know more about, what Cosmere theories are racing around in your heads, making you wonder, okay, what are you thinking? Because we know you're thinking it. If you have any of these questions you want us to discuss, email us at cosmerestudies@gmail.com. If the topic catches our interest, we might read and discuss your email during one of our episodes. In addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/innkeeperstable every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or the audio versions of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for the phrase Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us and contact us through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies on each of those sites. That's all we've got for this week's episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. But in 2 weeks, on October 15th, we'll be returning to Scadrial as we head into Mistborn Era 2 with Alloy of Law. This will continue our Halloween theme because now we have Mistborn dressed up as cowboys. In the meantime, on behalf of Charlie, Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening. And remember,
there's always another secret.